And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another amazing week of food safety, food quality, enjoying all those wonderful products that we eat without a second thought because of food safety, people like you that are out there protecting us. And a lot of times this work goes without any notice or by anyone. It's just assumed that it happens. But I know you're doing it. Richard knows you're doing it. And we wanted to say thank you this morning. We really appreciate it all. If you're new to the chat, welcome. Pull up a chair. This is the Food Safety Chat Live, and we are live streaming every Friday on LinkedIn and YouTube at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, where I get to bring on an amazing guest. And this is for you. What you'll notice with this conversation is it's exactly that. This is a conversation. This is not a lecture. This is not a bunch of PowerPoints. This is sharing of information so that all of us incrementally can get a little bit better, because food safety, not a point of competition. We're all in this together, and the public doesn't care. They just expect safe food. We're all doing the same thing. So really excited here today to have Richard Fleming on as a guest today. Richard, how are you doing today?
Wonderful, man. Good to be here. I've been really watching the show for a while.
And what's great is, so Richard has worked with Austin for a long time as well at Sage Media. And hey, there's Austin. Good to see you. And they bring a perspective that is so important, and we're going to just totally dive into this in the conversation today. And really, we're going to try and change some mindsets around this for training and what you need to be doing and how you need to approach things in your role to be effective. So Bonna's here, great. So Bonna has been, if you haven't connected with her online on LinkedIn, she's been putting out some fantastic comments and content here recently around food safety and her viewpoint on that. So thank you very much for that, Bonna. Tim is here. Good to see you, Tim. So he's back in Tennessee. That's good. Tim Richard is one of our road warriors. He's always traveling, and it's good that he's back home in Tennessee. So that's great. So one of the things that we love to do here on the chat, Richard, is we'll put in where we're at. And I am in, there we are, Loveland, Colorado, where we've been spoiled with very nice, cool weather recently, but that has definitely changed. So you're down in Aurora, right? Aurora, Colorado, right, Richard?
Mm-hmm. Just outside of Denver.
And I've been watching my weather forecast go up and up. I think next Friday they're now forecasting over 100 degrees.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah,
feels too early for that.
Yes, and so in Colorado, you this time of year you're fighting in May to have that beautiful, perfect lawn, and then everything just kind of goes to hell after that, because then it starts getting warm. You get the dead spots, and it just always looks like crap. So I'm enjoying it while I can, for sure. So with that, everybody, please join Richard and I this morning for a drink of your favorite beverage. I've got my coffee. What have you got this morning, Richard?
Just straight whiskey.
There you go.
It's all decaf coffee, but it's great.
So I have an espresso, and I probably shouldn't do this, but I'll make some regular coffee. But I put in a shot of espresso, and you get that nice foam on the top, and it's just really
crema.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Ethiopia, wow, welcome. That is super cool. We get people. That's one of the things I love with the chats. We get people from all over the world who join us, and that is just really cool.
That's great.
So one of the things I love to torture our guests with, Richard, is the dad joke. Are you ready for the dad joke?
Let's do it. No, it's gonna be painful.
So, Richard, how did the director stay cool when he was on the set?
I don't know.
He brings his own fans.
Oh, you even have the sad trombone too. That's wonderful. Oh my God.
So I'm sometimes I'm successful in finding a topical dad joke. Other times not. But this time I was like,
that's good. I don't think that this is one of those things like AI can't replicate. Like the dad joke things are really funny to me.
Exactly. Yeah. Scott Adams talks about that on his podcast, where AI they can do basic pun type stuff, but beyond that they suck.
It's pretty tough.
So with Sage Media, which you're the CEO over there, I tried to list on my openings here in our notes for our conversation exactly what you do, but you do so much stuff with your company. So why don't you kind of give everybody kind of an overview of what you do?
I'd say that the summary is that I make training films that look like movies that you'd watch at home. That's kind of like my elevator pitch. And part of the reason I do this is because when content is emotionally compelling, like a movie, it changes behavior. And most companies, I think, are really worried about training being ineffective. They spend all this money, they put all this time into it, only to have it not work. And I think there's a lot of issues with confidence around training that taking this approach solves. So we have a lot of evidence around what makes training great. We can even see through brain scans that people are more engaged and motivated differently when we utilize some of these storytelling principles, filmmaking principles. And I think it's really important because people don't want to hear this, but we treat media as though it's real life. The brain neurologically cannot differentiate between real people, places, and things. So, even if you tell yourself it's just a movie, your body and brain do not know any different. So I find there's a lot of power in doing this for, companies to learn faster for their teams or to find deeper purpose in their work, even to feel more energized by their specific contributions within their job role. So I try to help facilitate this in a lot of different ways. I do everything from the film production to learning design, and I've even started using go-to-market strategies, which is essentially a fancy way of saying managing all of the inbound marketing and outbound marketing for different companies. Because I come from a marketing background where we were using these technologies and these approaches and this research to drive actions, which were like, hey, buy my product or buy my service. And I think most of the reason that training teams don't do this in L&D, but they'll do it in marketing, is because it's really hard work, and often, or that they just don't know some of the secrets of the industry. I don't think they're that secretive, but from someone who's in L&D looking at it from a marketing perspective, it would inform a lot of their decisions. So I can help with a lot of the information and giving you some of the secrets, but I think it's really just like a 10,000 hour rule of I've been doing this stuff day in and day out. So it gets easier every single time that I do it. But you mentioned this.
What's L&D?
Oh, learning and development. So like anything in terms of human capital development, training, even compliance, I consider all that to be L&D.
Gotcha. Well, and it's something that I've railed against here on the chat is, these god awful, and I'm sure you've seen them all the time too, is these god awful PowerPoints that we use in the industry to train people. It's the same damn PowerPoint that they've used for the last 10 years. Everybody views it as a chore and nobody wants to be there. They give a quiz at the end that everybody has seen and everybody has memorized the answers. An absolute waste of time. And as you were kind of going over the elevator pitch kind of for what you do in your business, is that when I tune into TV to be entertained or to learn something, if I'm watching Law and Order, it's not a PowerPoint presentation of how Lenny Briscoe catches the criminal. Right? It's a story with progression and twists and turns, and you think they got the bad guy, and then we got the wrong guy, and then the judge throws out some of the evidence, and it takes all these turns, and then in the end they get the guy. It's the same thing. It's why do we think that these stupid PowerPoints are effective in training people? We couldn't have picked a worse way to train people.
It's just the lowest hanging fruit. And people think that it's not going to be that damaging. A lot of companies hold the mistaken belief that crappy training can't be that bad, but it's actually financially devastating. It's super expensive. It ruins the culture. It impacts the culture, lowers productivity. It's awful. And there's a huge need for improving training within, food safety in the food industry, because a lot of people make training that is neither memorable nor accessible. It's like, walls of text being like, well, how are they supposed to use this? What is the use case where they're actually drawing from this research? Is it like, I'm going to look it up on a wiki real quick, or I'm going to apply it in the field, or do I have to memorize it and apply it, master it? And I think we're seeing, AI tools come into this as a potential solution. But again, we're almost like using it incorrectly to a large degree.
Absolutely. And so part of this really is, and for the event notification, I put this in here, is that an important skill in here is creativity. And I think there's a false belief out there, Richard, that technical people are not creative. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely not. Like I agree that there's that misnomer, but I think that technical people are highly creative. I mean, if you're a human being and you speak a language, you're creative, like by definition.
And yeah, a good example of this would be engineers who develop, like to stay on the AI thing, with all the robots and all these things that are taking place right now. Engineers are some of the most creative technical people out there.
And it's the one thing that AI really can't do. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have, personal experiences. It can't synthesize to the degree that creativity requires. I mean, creativity is nothing more than taking two seemingly disparate ideas and merging them in a creative, unique, novel way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great definition, because as we were kind of talking about earlier this week, people like Albert Einstein, incredibly brilliant, but his intelligence was taking two weird things that were in no way connected and making that connection, and that's what intelligence is.
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, everyone thought that matter and energy operated in different principles, and he thought, well, I have to believe that the universe is so elegant, it would not have this weird bastardized systems. It would have a very uniform approach, and that's what had the major breakthrough. That was why they tell that story about him on the train. Yeah, but again, it's exactly that story. It's like it's really important to utilize more stories.
Yeah, again, stories. Yeah, Newton and the apple hitting him on the head. Right? We all remember those stories. So part of this then too.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if you know this, but like my background was in physics. Like I went to school for physics. And one of the things I thought was fascinating about it is that it is literally a story. Like math is a language. And when you look at the evolution of formulas, they have some kind of etymology. They have a history that builds on each other. So it's like, brick by brick. It's really fascinating to me. But
Well, you then are kind of a living example then of a person who studied a highly technical field who uses that to be creative.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like I'm in a perfect space right now with my business. I love the work that I do. It's an equal blend of artistry and technical mastery. And I just really like telling stories. And the best way that I do that is visually. So, I mean, I feel like I was always drawn to filmmaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about this in the past. One of your clients had put together a video, and I saw a little bit of it, and it still sticks with me, is the video from the company where the woman is jogging and then she ends up in the graveyard. Oh,
yeah.
That's so
because it gets people. Yeah. Well, because if you want to change behavior, you have to engage emotion. And the best way to engage in emotion is to tell people stories. It's the easiest, lowest cost form to do that. But with that film, I noticed that people would physically lean in as they were watching it. It made them curious, which is a really essential component when you're dealing with a lot of complicated topics, or you're dealing with non-compliance, employee non-compliance. The easiest solution to that is to have an emotional engagement. And this doesn't mean that you have to make people sobbing or angry. You just have to recognize that their motivations fall under one of three banners. It's either fear, desire, or sympathy. Mm-hmm. If you can find a way to engage that in any of your discussions, in your GMPs, in your actual bylaws, in your, again, marketing speak or your operations, R&D, all that stuff will drive a lot more cohesion among your teams.
Yeah. And that's a good example, is because, kind of putting that over into the real world. One of the things I would always work with companies when I was, head of quality within those would be, in this particular example, customer complaints. Is companies tend to look at those very analytical within the organization. Oh, well, we have a customer complaint rate of 5 complaints per million pieces of product. And they would go, that's good, that's good. I'm like, well, is it? Behind every one of those complaints is a person who's mad about something. Why are they upset? Why did they take the time to notify us? What trends are we seeing on that? Why do they actually like these products? You see this in R&D as well. R&D will create products internally of what they think the customer wants. Well, number one, because they like playing with different things, or R&D people. And okay, that's great. You've made product that makes you happy. Who cares? Is that the product that makes the consumer happy? And do you have any information that shows is that the case? And a lot of times I would get looks back like, what? Right? No, the sales guy said that we need this. Well, how do they know? Right. And that external connection, I think a lot of times in companies gets missed. And it really kind of gets into the overall theme of, I think this is something where the linkage with the quality people was really very strong then, is what we were talking about, Richard, relative to systems thinking. And what does that mean to you?
Well, systems thinking is a specific kind of methodology. It's a problem-solving approach that looks at elements as part of an integrated whole that each impact each other. So rather than just like individual pieces that exist as standalones. So an example I would use is, you've got some kind of crop, let's say it's corn. So that corn that you're growing is the result of multiple systems that influence and are actually influenced by it. And so that can be things like the soil and the nutrient content, which are themselves exist in the system based on the kinds of microbes that are in the soil. It can be the rainfall, which is part of a climate situation. It could be part of, legislation. How are farmers being allowed to farm? What are the practices? Like, even politically, we're talking a lot about immigration reform. And these are things that exist as a system that definitely influences the viability of that crop. And so systems thinking is great for food safety. I don't see a lot of people that have done it in a systematic way, meaning like, I think a lot of companies are using systems thinking. They're not calling it that. And by not calling it that, you're missing an opportunity to leverage all of the tools that they have to offer. And so I teach this, and actually this is I was working on a global food safety training that tied all of those departments together. So you'd have like agriculture to, transportation to manufacturing, processing, handling, all these things, all the way to retail. So from farm to fork, looking at it from a systems perspective is really useful. But the differentiator there is like, you have to be creative because it's solely about creative problem solving. Like food safety disasters, especially in a complex way, are just an absence of creativity.
Yeah. Interesting. And so Bill Marler, of course, the famous food safety attorney.
I love Bill.
So he made a connection like that. He's like, okay, fine. We've been having all of these problems with produce. Why? Why are we having these problems? Why are we seeing all these E. coli outbreaks time and time and time again? And he started looking at it. And he's like, you build these large produce farms out in the valley in California, and hey, what's right next to that? It's a giant feedlot full of cows with E. coli and then that's getting transferred into the field. That's looking outside of the system. If you just existed in a non-creative way and you were the quality manager for that produce company and you're saying, well, no, I've got GFSI certification and I meet all the requirements of the standard and therefore my food is safe, and you don't look at that outside connection, you're going to fail.
There was something recently that came up about alligators having salmonella. Or like the water, so you're basically piping the water from beneath the surface. They would be pumping it out, and they were finding contaminants because of this. Which is like, you wouldn't think of alligators as being relevant to say like the growth of spinach, but there are these very, very nuanced aspects there. And the benefit of using systems thinking is not just that you prevent liabilities; it's that you can also make a ton of money by doing it this way. Like you force things to happen in the way that are predictable for you. And so like an example I'll give is I was working with kind of a large a coffee retailer. And one of the things that they have is they have this process called NSF certification, which is like, 7 steps that you have to go through to get your drink approved. And it involves you kind of sending things out to the lab and getting results back. And you're getting a lot of different criteria you have to measure this thing up against before you just come up with it. And typically R&D teams will go through and they'll be like, I have this fancy idea for a drink. Let me come up with it. And then they go through the NSF certification. The problem though, is that can take 18 months to get that approved. I can cut that process down into 4 months using systems thinking.
Yeah.
So 18 months to 4 months is insane because part of what I'm doing is I'm creating the NSF certification in tandem with the R&D development. So you teach people how to think creatively with a constriction. I think another misnomer that I have to address is that, and I forget how Orson Welles phrased it, but basically he said that freedom is the enemy of creativity. Something to that effect of like, you cannot have completely unfettered options or you will never get anything done. And so I will often, when I'm coming up with really creative ideas, put an intentional block to make it challenging for me. And it's how you get through. So doing something like pairing NSF certification with R&D would change the game for so many different retailers.
Yeah. I refer to that as the Cheesecake Factory paradox. So in marketing, they've shown that if you give people too many options, because anybody's eating a Cheesecake Factory, right? Their menu's like this freaking thick. You start going through that thing and you can't pick. There's too many choices. and people will actually leave. You see this with other companies too that are very good at one thing, and then they start trying to diversify into other products. I saw an ad recently where Taco Bell is advertising chicken nuggets or something. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? That makes zero sense. That's just this weird disconnect in people's minds. And you have to be very choiceful on that. I mean, one of the things that I do, very similar to what you do, Richard, is I do risk assessment. So fine, you're certified and you have your SQFs. That's great. That's the base, and you need that. But I will talk with different departments and companies, and I will go to mergers and acquisitions, and like you're talking about, and say, hey guys, talk to me about how you do this process. And then they'll explain it. And I'll say, at what point in that process do you talk with the food safety people to make sure that you've factored in any improvements you need and you can adjust your bid on those products? And I don't think I've come across a company yet that went, yeah, we do that. Generally what will happen is a light bulb will go off and they'll go, oh, tell me a little bit more. I'm like, well, if you need to make $20 million in food safety improvements that you need when you buy this company, have you reduced your price of that bid $20 million to accommodate that additional cost in your systems? And if it's a deal breaker, you need to know that up front, right? And they're like, yeah. And that gets back to your point of accelerating the process. If it's something that's not going to work from a food safety standpoint, why are you even talking about it? You should stop at that point in time.
For sure. Yeah, Tim, I agree with you.
Tim is saying he loves the chicken strips here, but stay in your lane, bro. Exactly.
Well, it also interferes with your USP. I mean, if you think about like the difference between McDonald's and Burger King, and Burger King has been peddling the flame broiled, the concept for a while. It's like, and I worked on those campaigns. I worked on Whopper Lust, and I worked on the Creepy King back in the day. Yeah, that was partly me. I was on that team, so
wow.
But I want to apologize for it. We sold a ton of burgers, but I think that the piece of it is like that. Trying to think of like what differentiates you and your specific company culture is a part of that. Like you want to be able to like stay in your lane, bro, because it's really important to know that you're not going to be a different company. And I tend to work with a lot of different companies, and I don't tell people whether or not their culture is the most effective or not. Like it's kind of like whoever stands out. Is Walmart better than Amazon? Like, are the cultures better? It depends on who's the last standing in some way. So there's something about the amorality of cultures that I think people get hung up on. They want to just do the best thing, where it's like more important that you have a specific choice, that you lean into that choice, and that you have tools to help facilitate making that culture the absolute best it can be, knowing what you know about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So deciding, who am I? What do I stand for? Yeah. What are those different things in the market? So one of the things on this creativity piece, and I think this is definitely worth bringing up because you'd mentioned this earlier a little bit with AI too, is that within this framework of what we're talking about for training in food companies and food safety, how is AI helping? And also, I think more importantly, it's not a shortcut, right? Is it? How is that hurting creativity?
So it's a shortcut in some ways. I think that, as I mentioned, I think a lot of people are using it incorrectly. And they're kind of touting it as this like panacea that's going to fix all their problems. And they just don't understand really what it is. I think there's some really great uses for it. You're going to end up seeing it evolve more like, Google Maps. It's just going to be a thing that people use to kind of direct their day and help facilitate. But I think where it lacks is in the creative process, and people are trying to use it for that. It should be used to parse really large data sets and to help with assisting liability, like removing liability. Recently, there was something in California where they had like a 13,000 page set of bylaws, and they found some kind of like, passage about like legalizing slavery or something in there. And it would have taken people hundreds and hundreds of hours to go through that to find it and pull it out. But using AI assisted, I think it took them something like 80 to 160 hours. But that was of the system versus like years and years and years of litigators kind of looking through it. So, that's a really great use. And as a starting point for workflow, it's really useful. I'm seeing it being used in really egregious ways. And I'm also building a lot of AI tools to help people, like they call it like AI agentic, which is like one of the things I'm really excited about is this project called Craig. And I'll like have some more information about it when it's finally live. I'm looking for a business to sponsor this with. But what Craig does is it essentially becomes a mentor in real time. So rather than having like these massive amounts of information you're going through or sitting on an on-demand training course, you're getting your higher up who's become epitomized as an AI agent. And one of the things that the reason that I am doing this is because there was a man named Craig who worked for a company for 25 years. He was absolutely brilliant. He invented a magnet system that helped them improve the flow of their product and remove impurities. And he spent his entire life at this company. He was set to retire, and they wanted him to stay on retainer because he was so invaluable to the company. So they paid him 3 times his salary, just as being on call. And 6 weeks into retirement, Craig died. Ugh. And all of that knowledge went with him. They have none of the patents for that stuff. They don't have it yet. They've got their work documentation. No one's able to parse that kind of information. And they certainly don't get a sense of Craig as a person and the influences that the culture had on him over 25 years. The way he talks is very, specific. And the reason why this program I'm working on works is because it focuses on heuristics, which are the mental shortcuts that define mastery. So someone who is like a firefighter, Danny Kahneman in his book actually talked about this. He was doing these ride-alongs with firefighters, and he's trying to figure out, like, how do you know where to fight a fire? Like, what's going on? And they pull up to a house that's burning, and the guy looks at it and he goes, all right, team, in the kitchen, it's in the kitchen. We're going through the front door. We're blowing out the back wall. And they do it, and it's done in like 15 minutes. There's a crazy amount of time. And Kahneman later is talking to the guy, and he goes, how did you know it was a kitchen fire? And the guy goes, well, I saw the vent pipe for the overhead fan. So I knew that, it was very likely going to be in there. He said, but you walked right in the front door. What if there was like danger there? Why didn't you go around the back and address it where the fire was visible? And he goes, why would you push the fire further into the house and damage more of it? Blow out the wall. It's easy to fix. And we push the fire out, not back in. And, meanwhile, Kahneman's like, man, this is so crazy. But this guy had, a decade and a half of experience doing this stuff. So he knew. And that's the thing where we're going to see a lot of mastery being transposed. That could be done with agentic AI. That's the goal of what I'm trying to do, is create those dimensions of genius and give them to a budding employee or a new employee. And then you have an easier knowledge transfer as the aging group exits, and you're not having to hold them on retainer and spend all that money. Also, you're not losing the company's secrets when someone's like, hey, I'm taking all of my knowledge that I got working with you, and I'm going to go to your competitor now with it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's obvious to me, but yeah. So for that coming up.
So that kind of reminds me. So there's a principle I kind of do in quality. I think it kind of reflects on this. I'm curious to get your comments on this. Is that a lot of times in quality, what you need to focus on is not what to do when things go right, but what to do when things go wrong. Yeah. And AI is, it's like, okay, here's the corpus of information out there on these processes and systems that doesn't give you that dimension. So when I'm working with companies, I'll say, okay, well, in your receiving functions, how do you do that? Da, 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 da. Great. What happens if that truck shows up and it's warm? What happens if the truck shows up and it's missing the seal on the back? What do you do? Yeah. And that information is not in AI. That's experience. No. And you learn those experiences, just like those firefighters, through mistakes, right? So I can guarantee that firefighter at some point in his past did exactly the wrong thing and went, oh shit. Sure. And okay, all right, I know not to do that in the future when I see these particular circumstances. And that became automatized in his evaluation process, where they would pull up, to your point, bam, 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 bam. Okay, do this.
Yeah. And so, Tim, to your point, the way to prevent things from going wrong is through creative ideation. So I teach an actual workshop. It's $2,500. It's going to go. Price is actually going to go up. But one of the things I'll teach is actually how to preemptively think of these things prior to them coming down the line. And when we talk about creative innovation, all creative innovation comes in 4 stages. You have to go through each of these 4 distinct stages in order to be successful. And the 4 stages are that you clarify what the problem is, you ideate a massive amount of potential solutions, you develop the most viable one, and then you implement that said solution. So clarify, ideate, develop, and implement. And the thing with that is that everyone has a unique preference for what stage of creative innovation they prefer. And if you are not in that stage, you tend to feel very drained. And when you are in that stage of preference, that zone of preference, you tend to be very energized. And so there's an assessment tool, takes 10 minutes, 36 questions to find out what your creative preference is. And this is a really great way to build team dynamics. So you can actually help integrate and say, hey, this person loves to ideate. I don't. I love to clarify, and like vice versa. But the tools within each of those phases are manifold. I mean, Bryan, you do your assessment, so I imagine you use 5 Whys or use Fishbone, I think, there's also like webbing, which is great. You can move into ideation, which has divergent thinking, where you're generating like a massive amount of ideas that are novel and make connections. And then you move into the development, which uses convergent, where you're kind of killing your darlings. And then even further on, you go into implementation, which is a lot of project management tools and Scrum and managing some of these. Like there's something called a 12-week year I really like for project management. And so all these things really help you find out how to preemptively do this. In conjunction with that, I'll often run like an actual food safety development workshop that specifically helps you like cater that to. It's less on the creative. There's some of it in there, but it's more of like specifically for food risks. How do you preemptively look for those things and anticipate them? Because that's the future here, is like, how do you anticipate? How do you creatively do that? And I think it's available, but people are treating creativity like it's cheap because so much is about time to market. And that's the danger with AI is it's really great for time to market. You have got to contain it within that one specific thing. It's not supposed to be all things to all people. It has a very specific use case. We can't get so enamored that we forget what makes us actually human.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to kind of with you were talking about with Craig, is that if I have a particular problem and I'm looking for a creative solution for that problem, I'm going to seek out a mentor who has expertise in that area. So, for example, if I have a particularly difficult, let's say, environmental monitoring issue, I have a client and they've got this persistent pathogen in the environment and they can't get rid of it, and I've been helping them, and I'm not quite sure where to go. I'm going to give Dr. Marshall a call at Eurofins. I'm going to say, hey, Doug, got this problem going on. And he's going to go,
Yep.
Have you thought about this? Damn, you're right. Let me go. Yeah. And then just with that one little question, he'll send me off on a new path.
Yeah. Well, and even like you mentioned the film that I had done for that food company. One of the plot twists in the movie was that the contaminant was salt. And there are people that were like, I've worked in this industry for 30 years. Salt is sterile. And I go, well, not in certain contexts. And like new research has come out that showed that. And it broke their brains because they had not realized like, oh my God, everything I thought I knew is changing. And if you're not adapting, you're dead. Even if you're maintaining, it's like inflation, right? Like you have your money in the bank account, you're not going to beat inflation. You have to like decide there's a certain degree of growth that you are going to implement every single year. And that curve is getting exponentially higher. And so we can approach that from a very doomist perspective of like, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to keep up with the times and I'm just going to be put out to pasture. Or we can approach it with a really excited, opportunistic view, which involves creativity. When you are in flow creatively, your entire world changes and it improves your mood. It does all these amazing things for you, but we have to be encouraged to do that. And I cannot urge enough for companies to please support creative ventures within your team. Like make it so that the conditions are conducive to them being able to be creative.
Yeah. And yeah, there's a
soapbox.
I mean, well, they even have a term for this, right? Is we have a certain view relative to issues and we've decided how we approach these things. And then to your point, Richard, a alternate viewpoint comes up that clashes against what you currently hold as a view. And then cognitive dissonance kicks in. And your mind is just like, right. And it tries to figure out ways to continue defending your existing viewpoint, even though you see evidence to the contrary. And you see that all the time in people. And part of it is recognizing it. And a lot of times you can't recognize it yourself. You don't even know you're doing it, but other people can see it. And it gets very interesting from that side. Duncan had an interesting point here that I wanted to explore with you as well.
Hey, Duncan. Good to see you.
So AI, with enough context, it can reach conclusions without experience. My initial take on this is that in the context of what Duncan is saying here, is AI is essentially it backwards looking, isn't it? It can
Yes.
look at the universe of information that's there already. It
All
cannot
data
extrapolate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, all data is in the past, but
Yeah.
you wouldn't drive your car looking through the rear view mirror. So part of it is like, yes, there's a lot of suggestions, and you can mitigate some risk or make a more informed decision. But I think what we're talking about is knowing what we don't know, like not knowing what we don't know. Even it's like there's something in the future where it's going to be so rapid that we're not even sure what technological advantage is going to happen in the next 15 to 20 years. Even in the next 5 years, you're going to have a major boost in something. So I think data is really great. I use data in my training programs. One of the big questions is like, how do you know that a learner is engaged? And I use biometric tools that can track your dopamine and oxytocin levels. So you can send out a link to a YouTube video, and basically they watch it, and via this app, it will tell you at what point, second by second, they were engaged. So that's your focus group. You don't hand out smile sheets and any of that stuff. Find the people who agree to like go through the focus group, and you'll have an immediate sense of where they drop off their attention. And I see this a lot with training programs where you have the nugget of truth, or like the thing you want them to learn, or some kind of call to action that comes well after people have checked out. And so like you see this in movie trailers, and this is actually the technology they use it mainly for movie trailers, is that you have this, different kind of roller coaster experience of people watching a film or watching a movie trailer, and where the immersion, so they call it, hits high, where you have both dopamine and oxytocin, they'll put the release date. And, the dopamine is really your uncertainty molecule. It's things that like any changes in your environment help trigger it. So if I give you $5, you're going to get a dopamine spike. But if I keep giving you $5 at a repeatable time, like every 5 minutes, you might still enjoy that, but you're not getting dopamine. So you have to move into what they call emotional resonance, which is triggered by oxytocin. That's where you actually care about what's at stake. And so a lot of training, like you might be able to get people's attention by like, flashing something in front of their face. You now need to move into why this matters to them. And that is something that like you should be tracking. The app is like $134 per year. So like, it doesn't cost anything to do this, these are technologies I feel like if people are using data in real time, it becomes a little more interesting. But again, I think that like how you tie that in with AI is a creative solution that's very, very specific to what your business outcomes are. And I wanted to back up very briefly because there's something we mentioned earlier about this divide of how people talk about these specific things, and that like the language that we use around stakeholders from, quality assurance people, there's a reason that they get frustrated because we're not speaking to that emotional aspect of it. We're not speaking the story of it. So you mentioned the consumer complaints, people come in, it's 5%, that's a real person. It's also why quality assurance frustrates stakeholders, and stakeholders frustrate quality, is because they're not speaking that same language. And so taking all of this in kind of, holistically, we have to really radically change how we're communicating across the board, across these different silos.
Right. Well, and you'll often see this with successful advocates for a cause that are rallying politicians or people to their. It's because they have a personal stake in it. It's like, I went through this and my child was hurt by this, or some type of tragedy that they can personally relate to and connect with other people. And other people can then say, oh my God, how would I feel if that happened to my child, or something like this?
Yeah.
Right? That's the story you need to tell.
Absolutely. That empathy is really an essential part of it. And I think, a lot of food scientists and people in quality, I think they have a bad rap for that sort of thing, like the empathy aspect of it. I'm just, as like an FYI, I'm like highly autistic. I mask very well. But a lot of my peers in food safety are also neurodivergent. And it comes out a lot that, there's a disconnect between that. And the reality is like, I think a study came out recently showing how autistic folks have a lot more sensitivity to emotion, even if they don't express it. And, so I think part of it is like this double-edged sword of, we want to use more emotionally compelling materials, but it can feel very overwhelming. And so there's some mitigation of that, which is why I'll run these workshops, because I don't think it's about being as extreme as possible. It's about catering to the specific message and the emotional triggers, the positive emotional triggers of your audience. With the food safety video you're referencing with a woman in the graveyard, that was a very extreme training because we had done research to find out, is this going to hurt people like emotionally, or is it going to motivate them? And you do that through anthropological research, needs analysis, a lot of the stuff that you're doing, all that discovery, but you pick the message for the right audience.
Wow. Well, and I think part of this too, right, is as we were talking about, and this kind of goes back to your 4 points that you were making, which I wanted to reemphasize again. So when you're working on a problem, right, your clarification, ideation, development, and then implementation. And what I see sometimes is, again, this is back to that internal focus. I'm the quality manager. This is my problem. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to figure out the solution on my own. And to your point, there's of those 4 different stages, there's things that you naturally gravitate towards. So if you're quality guy, it's probably going to be clarification. Okay, I need to establish the reason that this happened, as you talked about the 4 whys or whatever, and then I'll extrapolate a reason why that happened. And in quality, if you're on the receiving end of that, that's really easy to see, because if there's one thing I hate, and if I saw this, it was a major red flag for if I was dealing with a supplier or a co-man or one of my plants, is I would give them an issue. Say, hey, the consumers are saying this, we're seeing these type of complaints, go back and investigate. Number one, I would get a response back a couple of days later. And the response was retrained operators. That told me everything I needed to know. Number one, you did zero work. You told me nothing. You're just glossing over this, and it's going to continue. I need to send somebody in there to figure out what's going on. The most obvious question, if I wanted to pound somebody on the head, would be, well, if you know that your training was ineffective in the first place, why in the hell do you think it's going to work now?
Dude, that it bothers me so much. Like I'll tell people that only 10% of training is effective. That's the research, right? And we spend globally $480 billion with a B on training. And the fact that everyone in learning will be like, oh yeah, 10%, that's about right. Like I heard that. I'm thinking, like, if FedEx only delivered 10% of their packages, like they would not be in business. So why are we somehow like okay giving training a pass that it can be ineffective? The literal reason it exists is to bridge a skill gap. And so most of the training I'll do is actually skill based. So if you have a program, it's like, what do you want them to physically do? Like, what do you want them to know? But what do you want them to do? Like, and how are you going to observe that? Hand washing and some other like non-compliance stuff is really obvious, because you can look at that and say, yeah, they did or did not do the thing I wanted them to do. But it's something that like is still missed, because people think, well, I want to make them aware of pathogens. It's like, awareness does not motivate somebody to be able to do anything differently about it. Like, I know that I shouldn't be eating late at night, but I'm going to anyway, if I don't have these other systems in place to help prevent me from doing that, or other kind of motivators. And so, I always go back to storytelling, because storytelling creates that inductive learning experience. It drives curiosity, and you want people to be able to figure out their own solutions. So if I tell you a story, you're going to try to figure out what it means on your own. If I just tell you the underlying meaning, you're going to be like, stop preaching at me. If I'm like, hey, like, don't be distracted or it'll lead to disaster, you're going to go like, yeah, I know. But if I tell you a story about, somebody who was texting and driving and died, you'd be like, that's really awful and compelling. Like, I don't want to repeat that. And so it's a nuanced thing, but those kinds of aspects are really important, because it gets somebody to actively engage in their own development. That's key. Yeah.
And I mean, yes, a couple of points on that is that, that preachy personality, when you said that, Richard, the immediate vision that popped in my head is the Karen videos you see on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
This lady who's like, you can't fish on this pier. And the person's like, well, what are you talking about? You can't be, just that whole lecturing attitude associated with that. And the other piece of it was on that emotional connection is texting and driving. Right? It's like, you shouldn't text and drive. Oh yeah, sure. Right. We see people doing it all the time. And if I see somebody, I'm going down the highway, I'm like, okay, I'm staying far away from that car. But in particular, there was a commercial that was put together. I don't even remember who it was, which shows the power of this, is that they would put up text messages on the screens and be like, be home in a bit. And then the mom would come on and say, that was the last message I got from my daughter who was texting coming home.
Yep.
She died in the car wreck.
Yeah, literally, like I built a storytelling how-to course for learning designers, and that's like the opening story was my eldest son. I actually read a story about that exact thing. It was like, be there soon, and it was like never made it. And so it was like this thing of how awful that was, that was left in the message. It was unsent. It was like the crazy thing for me. So those are the aspects where you're driving a behavior, but there's a formula for it. And I don't want to get like too into the weeds with that, but it's very much about like, even I think about Hubert's point here with stakeholders having different interests or profits, or profit in mind. I think that you guys that work at a company together all have a unified vision. Otherwise, you would not be able to do business. Mm-hmm. I think that the way that goal comes about and manifests is different. Like the technique or the strategy you use, that's your job role. And so one of the things that helps is when you can unify your message to align with that overarching goal. So knowing that like, if profit is an issue, you talking about quality, you can obviously make a case for profit. And I think that it's both things, right? Stakeholders need to talk to the language of their other team members as well. But it really changes the narrative when you say, like, I'm going to tell you the story that aligns with what the company ultimately wants and why we're all here together.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So I think this all kind of links in within our conversation as well, is we were also talking about change in the marketplace, because that's really what we're talking about here, right? Is we need to be able to adapt and react to this quickly, and creativity is key in that. So we were talking about earlier this week about like unexpected factors. So I definitely wanted to get into that a little bit as well too, and how that impacts what we do.
Mm-hmm. Well, specifically, like what aspect of that?
So the example I was thinking of was like all of a sudden Ozempic hits the market, and and we're seeing now that snack food consumption is way down.
Yeah, well, and there was a story that came out recently I thought was interesting. I think they're called Dave bars or David bars. They're a protein bar, and the guy the head of it acquired a different company for $75 million that had a patent on some kind of plant-based oil or substance that has an insane calorie to protein ratio. So like very low calorie, very high protein. And he has the patent, and now no one can use that ingredient. Like that ingredient is now locked. And so you think of like competitors to that market, if you're in protein bars or some kind of similar snack food, that upsets your entire business model. Now everyone's going to these David bars or Dave bars. I should probably remember what the actual brand is called. But Ozempic was the same thing. Like we saw sales dwindle from snack food companies because people were not, interested in that. That is a completely tangential event that has implications that are beyond or more than adjacent. They're directly impacting our business. And so if you're not, again, creatively minded, you hear that and you go, oh God, we're devastated. We're ruined. Instead of saying, okay, cool. What is the new opportunity based on that threat? And so, part of the thing that's involved in my assessment, which I think there's probably not a lot of overlap from the two things that we do. But I think there's the things where I think we overlap is on the SWOT analysis. I look at it from more of like a cultural perspective, like a cultural SWOT analysis. But I think that going through those kinds of formats are really helpful for people to see, what are the risks involved. I got to tell you, man, like I've been working with a lot of very large companies, and I even put this on a LinkedIn post recently. They are not going to be here in 2 to 3 years. They have way too much confidence in them being stalwart businesses. They've been around for a long time. They're not going to be here. And like, I'm seeing under the hood and I'm going like, hey guys, like this is absolutely serious. And they go, no, we're fine. Like, no. Like you are on fire. Like literally your house is on fire and you're sitting here going like, well, the water bill's been high, so we're not going to like get the hose out. Like it's very severe. And I'm worried about it. Oh, I see the David bars. Yeah.
There we go.
Thanks for
I was thinking that meme that we see all the time of that cartoon character sitting on a chair in hell or whatever.
The dog.
Around.
Yeah. This is fine. He's got a little coffee cup.
Yeah.
I mean, it's delusional, but.
Yeah. And all you have to do is look at history and say, okay, the blue chip companies of the 70s, IBM, 3M,
yep.
Are they still the powerhouses that they were then? No. You have these disruptors that come in and change the marketplace. Microsoft comes in. Did Microsoft invent Windows? No, they didn't. They bought that technology and they used it then and built it into what we use now. You have these changes that happen in the marketplace. And to your point then, Richard, is being able to creatively look at those things and extrapolate and say, what direction are these things going, and taking an educated guess, because it's too complex. We don't know. It's kind of like looking at those like Time magazine or Mechanics magazine or something from the 60s, and they'll say, what's the world going to look like in 2000? And all the flying cars with the Jetsons and whatever, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't be more wrong of what actually happened. We can't guess, but we need to extrapolate.
I actually recently rewatched Blade Runner, which was the movie that got me into making movies. It's so good. It holds up so well. But there are a lot of interesting things there. Like 2019 was supposed to have flying cars and all this crazy futuristic stuff. And so the expectation is not there. It's not matching what the reality is. But I would also say, too, like in the context of these larger businesses, a lot of them have USPs that are not as resilient as they may think. So you'll have like a food company. I mean, that's what we're talking about with Taco Bell pivoting, because they know that the staple of their business is not apt for growth. They're fixated on growth, and they've saturated the market. They're probably noticing a decline, and there's not much more to offer. We're seeing this with Starbucks in terms of their menu strategy. They're trying to do these different things to bring people back in. But all of this is moot if you don't have some of the underlying processes and procedures in place that are going to help you reinforce the culture. Like a company like Starbucks, if they had one food safety disaster, would level them. It would tank them overnight. I'm seeing this with, it's similar to Duolingo being like, we are now AI agentic only. We're getting rid of our developers. They lost a huge market share because of that. That one announcement, which they thought was going to be this great deal, we're on the trend for AI, catastrophic results. They were backpedaling their entire social media campaign. And I would hate to see companies like that in food do the exact same thing because they are just worried or they don't want to rock the boat. You can make informed decisions that have an impact, but you have to think of it creatively, and they're just not. They're doing what has been done. And this is actually why I got out of advertising. I've done a lot of stuff in advertising. I edited a Super Bowl commercial. Like, I worked with the largest brands in the world. But it got to a point where we were just remaking commercials that had been successful at Cannes 3 years prior. So you'd see like a Coca-Cola commercial I had done becomes like an Ambien ad. And it's like, I didn't get into this game to not make an impact. I want to make millions of dollars for my clients, hundreds of millions of dollars for my clients. And that's like not going to happen if you're doing business as usual.
Yeah. Well, it's a common refrain I hear from people relative to movies, right? It's like they're all remakes. It's like, no, no, don't take my favorite movie from my childhood and make a new version. Go to hell, right? No, do not do that.
Yeah. Well, and actually to that point, this is perfect because on the surface, the executives are saying it makes us money. I don't care what you say, it makes us money. It's why all the same actors are the same. Like they've got like Jack Black in all of the gaming movies. He was in Super Mario Brothers. Now he's in Minecraft. There's a reason for that, and it has quarterly profits. It looks good in that temporary space. But there's a saying of like marketers think in years and salespeople think in quarters. It's very much that. And so we have not seen the complete devastation of it, which is why I say in 2 to 3 years, these companies are going to go under. They may even look profitable. They're not going to be. And I hate to be that harbinger of bad news, but like the writing is on the wall. I've done this for 17 years. I've seen every iteration of this in every industry. I've worked across the verticals from hospitality to manufacturing, industrial, CPG, food, you name it. So it's an interesting landscape where we are now because that window is being shortened dramatically.
Wow. So let's kind of bring this back then kind of for the technical people in our audience. So we're all part of a company. We want our companies to be successful and helping to understand these things. So how can technical people effectively communicate these type of strategies to non-technical people? So taking all this analytical information we have and then converting that information into these other groups so that they can relate to it and act against it.
So much like you have data storytelling, you need to have storytelling for other kinds of initiatives and asks. And it's very simple if you have a tested framework. So you can use a framework for storytelling that I use. There's a host of them, and they change based on like, am I telling a testimonial story or a case study story? I have to frame that data in a very specific way. For testimonials, I really like the problem, attempted solution, actual solution framework. So a company says, hey, I had this issue. I tried these other things. They did not work. And then I used brand X, and all of a sudden now my life is complete. So very simple things like that. But like, and all of this is in a storytelling course that I teach, but I've also got free webinars on my YouTube channel for Sage Media that you guys are happy to take a look at. I try to explain this stuff as much as possible and make it accessible. It can still be hard if you haven't been doing it, like I said, for 10,000 hours.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's your firefighter example. You know not to go in the front of the building.
Oh God, dude, I can look at a video in like one viewing, tell you 20 different things that you could do with the content you shot. You wouldn't have to reshoot anything to improve the effectiveness of that video. It's that bad. Right. And I'll do that for people. They'll like send me stuff and they'll be like, hey, how can I make this different?
Yeah, well, right? And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Duncan here as well. I can't put a question in AI that gives me the answer you're talking about. I can't put the question and say, hey, AI, what's wrong with this training I just created? You aren't going to get an answer back for that.
I'd also say that one of the things that we need to implement more is psychological safety and the environment for creativity. Like what gets funded gets rewarded. And often companies are just they're not putting their money where their mouth is. And I've seen a crazy downturn of spend. So normally like I'm flush with clients. I don't advertise. This is the first year that I've noticed it really drop in terms of training budgets and marketing budgets, which is, it's somewhat typical in an election year. It doesn't matter the president. There's always a bit of a decline. This is the worst. And I think because people are feeling a sense of uncertainty, and that's forcing them to make really fear-based decisions, which are not good. Like when you need to be rational, and they'll tell you like, no, I'm being rational, but it's not. 95% of our decisions are automatic and emotional, and we later rationalize them after. So,
yep, that's 100% true. We were talking about this on Monday. If you're looking for a new car, you're attracted to that fancy sports car. You should probably buy the economy car, but you love the sports car, and you'll figure out a way to justify the sports car. Well, the sports car, it's an Audi, and it's got all-wheel drive, so it's going to be good in the snow. So that's going to be better than. No, it's not. You're just justifying your emotional purchase.
One of the best campaigns I ever saw was, do you know Blendtec, the blender?
I've heard of them.
Okay, they're like a $600 blender, like upwards of $600. They have a 1 horsepower motor, all this stuff, like the specs or whatever. What got me to buy like 2 of them was because they had a show called Will It Blend? And the guy would blend, he would blend an entire broom, like literally put a broom into this thing, or like iPhones or cubic zirconia. And it was really like this very dry humor kind of like dad type. And he had these little dad jokes that he would like issue throughout, but he was the owner of the company. This was the most successful campaign I'd ever seen. And it just was like that, again, feeding to the emotions of, I like this guy. He's demonstrating the value in real time, and I'm emotionally compelled to buy this really badass blender because it's going to do all these other things for my life.
Super cool.
That's
So
right,
I put your website in here, and definitely. So you had mentioned as well,
cool.
Richard. You have other links to put into.
Yeah. So I'd love it if you guys would connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll put some stuff here. There's also. I think it failed to post to you. Let me see if that works.
I think it may went in the private. Just put it in the public area. I think I can pull it out of private. Let me try this.
Yeah, let's see what we do.
Well, as I'm doing this, we're getting a little short on time here. What would you kind of like to leave everybody with here today? Kind of closing thoughts at the 30,000 foot kind of summary level.
I would say embrace your creative self and strengthen that, because that's really where you're going to have a competitive advantage, even moving forward from an employment standpoint. And I think, and also, Bryan, would you mind putting my LinkedIn profile there too, just so folks can connect with me? I'd love to answer any questions if you have it. But yeah, I think the main thing is just embrace the fact that you are creative, emotional people, and that's okay. And that there's a lot of potential that can come out of that to use more stories where you can, collect them, go through some of the frameworks that are on the YouTube channel, and let me know if you have specific questions. But I think that this is a really great way to get what you want. One of the things that I've had a lot of success with my training programs is that I'm leveraging the budgets from other departments. So I don't just, quality assurance usually calls me and says, hey, we have this issue. Can you help us fix it? And I say, great. Yeah. But this also will help with operations. It will help with M&A. It will help with marketing. It will help with sales. They can use the same assets because they transcend being just a normal like PowerPoint presentation that's didactically dumping information. You can show a client this and go, this is what makes us a leader in the industry. Yeah. Go, oh God, that's amazing. I've seen people take my stuff to conferences and present them as keynotes, being like, here's what we did. And guess how much business they get from that? Like it's a huge pride booster. And so I think it's like, think more creatively and embrace the fact that like the creative companies are going to be the ones that stand the test of time.
Yep, absolutely. And as an individual contributor, you have to be able to show that you understand the business and you contribute to the business. You have to get outside of your box. So, yeah. Wow, this went super fast. Fantastic. So
it did. I was like, man.
Wow, thanks for joining us, Richard. This was an amazing conversation.
And, I love this. This is great. I love what you're doing. Yeah. It's so good.
Awesome. So with that, guys, we're going to bring our chat here to a close for this week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Amazing comments that we had here today. The community that we've built here, Richard, and the groups that we're able to share this information, I love it. So we'll be back here. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful comments. Mm-hmm.
So we'll be back here next Friday at the same time. So on LinkedIn and YouTube at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we'll bring another amazing guest like Richard onto the chat to bring content for you to make everything a little bit better in your life. But in the meantime, enjoy your weekend. Have a good time. Go out there and enjoy the sun, and we'll join it, and we'll do it all again next week. So thanks, everybody. See you then.